Her true story from Colorado. My daughter-in-law slammed the door and said, "You're just a guest here." So I packed, smiled, and froze their bank account. She wanted to run the house. I reminded her who funded it. "You're lucky we let you live here," my daughter-in-law hissed, slamming the guest room door so hard I felt the whole hallway shudder. "You don't get a say under our roof." I remained seated in the living room, the armchair where I had painted fresh white baseboards with my own hands the first day they moved in. That chair held the weight of decades, surgeries, hospital shifts, whispered prayers for my late husband, and now it felt heavier than ever beneath me. After my husband passed from cancer 2 years ago, I packed up what little I had left and drove to Colorado, offering to move in with my son and daughter-in-law. They had just had their second child, a healthy little girl who still smelled like warmth and hope. I thought living with family again would bring comfort. I thought helping with the grandkids, preparing meals, and sharing the bills would be a balm for all of us. I never expected to become a guest in my own home. I had always paid my share. I used my nurse's pension to cover groceries, utilities, medical bills, everything I could spare. I volunteered to pay for preschool tuition when they faced tuition hikes, and I handled the increased electricity and gas costs during the brutal Colorado winters. I never asked for anything in return. Not a thank you, not even acknowledgement. I thought family worked that way. You give until it hurts, and you keep giving. At first, everything was as I hoped. I was the caretaker, the wise grandmother with jokes and warm hands. The kids laughed when they saw me, my daughter-in-law smiled politely, and my son called me Mom, the way he always did. But slowly, the warmth receded like a tide pulling out to sea. Comments stopped being polite and began to sting. "Mom, you left the garage door open again," my daughter-in-law snapped one day. I mumbled my apology, then moved the pickup inside without another word. A week later, I found my framed family photos, moved to a corner shelf, labeled Mom's Keepsakes. The tone shifted more. They started doing things without me, making meal plans in a group chat I was removed from, hiring a housekeeper when I offered to clean, even enrolling the kids in camps without so much as a mention. My presence, once valued, began to crumble into inconvenience. "I thought you said you were staying temporarily," she said last month as I served cinnamon rolls in my softest voice. "We need the guest room for the storage or my craft corner." She flashed a tight smile I did not appreciate. "You should get your own place." I did not answer. I only pushed back my chair and carried my plates to the sink as quietly as I could. Then, this morning came. I was preparing oatmeal and fresh fruit for the kids, my usual routine, when I heard their voices through the hallway. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but it was hard not to hear when she screamed it so loud. "You're lucky we let you live here," she hissed, her hand slamming the guest room door. "You don't get a say under our roof." That sentence echoed. You don't get a say. You're lucky. The fault lines of my heart shifted. I carried the bowls of oatmeal into the dining room, placing them carefully while my grandson and granddaughter stared up at me. They still treated me like their grandma. They smiled, they thanked me, they believed I belonged. But where did I truly belong? I turned to my son later, the one whose first word I heard, whose first steps I cheered. His face had the same eyes, but today there was something different. A hesitance, a guilt that vanished when he glanced at his wife. "I am sorry," he said, looking away. "I did not mean," Cision, she interrupted, perched on the couch with her silenced phone and clipped posture. "Let's just let her stew. She will get it eventually." And just like that, they dismissed me. I was no longer Mom. Not really. I had become someone they tolerated, someone whose money they spent, but whose presence they despised. A half hour later, I sat in my old chair, my hands folded in my lap like a soldier, preparing for orders. I thought of my husband. I thought of the home we built together. I thought of the paint I applied with his namesake, and the floors we refinished by moonlight. Now, someone else ruled the house we bought, someone who treated me as a liability. I could feel the tears wanting to come, but I blinked them back. I steeled myself. It was not about anger. It was about truth. It was about remembering that while names could be removed, contributions could not be erased. I rose slowly. The chair creaked in protest. I patted it once as if to say thank you for holding me up. When I finally stood, I needed a plan, and with her door still shut behind her hissed words, I promised myself I would remind them who really kept their lives afloat. 402 words to go, and the foundation's already shaking. I wake before dawn, as I always have, because the house feels emptier in the dark, and I feel needed even when I am not. I slip into the kitchen in my slippers, pulling on an apron that still fits me from 5 years ago. I light the stove and start chopping vegetables. Carrots for the stew, spinach for the quiche, apples for oatmeal. I set the coffee pot to brew and place bowls and spoons on the counter. I do this every morning, without complaint, because feeding my family feels like my purpose. I bring the ingredients downstairs, stir the oatmeal with a wooden spoon, and fill the kettle with hot water for tea. I hustle to shower and dress before the kids wake, then guide them through breakfast, reminding my granddaughter to wash her hands and helping my grandson find matching socks. Their laughter fills the kitchen, and I smile, because at least I belong to them. We sit together at the long oak table, the same one I helped them pick out at the furniture store 2 years ago. I serve oatmeal in plain white bowls, fresh fruit on the side, and a pitcher of orange juice. But when I sit down, I only take a seat at the far end. Their daughter-in-law slides her plate across, then folds her arms and joins my son. My words are met with polite silence. My questions are met with clipped answers. My presence feels like a background blur rather than a face to cherish. Throughout the meal, I feel eyes flicker toward me from time to time, my son compassionately, my daughter-in-law judgmentally. I swallow a bite of oatmeal softly, tasting cinnamon and fruit, wondering when I became wallpaper. It stings more than I expected. As the kids rush off to school, I wash dishes and wipe counters. The house feels bigger now, too big in some rooms and too small in others, empty spaces where my influence once radiated. I fold laundry in silence, thinking of the day I first offered to help with bills. I remember the look in my son's eyes when I said, "Let me pay for utilities, maybe preschool, to take some pressure off you two." He nodded. She looked uncertain, as if she doubted why I insisted. I told them it was a gift, from a mother who had lost her own mom too soon, who knew what it felt like to struggle. I created a trust account in my name, never mentioning it out loud, where my advance pension checks were deposited. From there, monthly withdrawals paid for electricity, gas, groceries, and the children's preschool tuition. I believed I was building quiet security for them. I believed giving was enough to show love, but I did not realize that money can become a weapon rather than a gift. I keep the trust account statements tucked in my desk drawer. I glance at them sometimes, not because I want anything back, but to remind myself of the steady flow of care I was giving. I was the one holding them together behind the scenes, keeping the home functioning. And still, I did not ask for credit. One afternoon, I overhear her say to a friend on the phone, "She's just here because she has nowhere else to go." I pretend not to hear, but something inside me tightens. She talks like I am a charity case, not a mother pouring herself out for family. I finish folding towels with shaking hands. That night, I am brave enough to bring up school lunches and registration. Neither child qualifies for the low-income reduced price anymore, and I thought she might appreciate the help. I say, "Would you like me to cover the field trip fees too?" I remember last year, she cuts me off without looking up from her phone. "You don't have a vote." The words fall heavy, maybe the heaviest word I have heard in a long time. Those words ring like a verdict. I do not belong here. I want to say so many things, like, "I paid for this roof, so you don't get to decide who eats at this table," but I only nod. I reach for my teacup and take a slow sip, burning my tongue, conscious of the tears I will not let come. When I head upstairs, I pass the guest room door. It bears her name now, again. I restored the paint on that frame, reminded them it was a guest space, but now it feels like a cage. I pause at the top of the stairs, hand on the railing, and fight the urge to lose it. My hands feel rough and tire-worn, my back aches from bending in hospitals for decades. I think, in that moment, she could never stand a day of my past life. She could never handle the days I spent bleeding over paperwork, nights I spent watching dying patients, and yet she has the audacity to say I have no vote here, when I funded the life you have built. I hold my breath and remind myself of the promise I made this morning. I will not cry. I will not beg. I will not shrink. I will find a way to remind them I matter. I close my eyes, Picture the trust statements again, the names, the approvals, the stamped receipts, and I realize I might soon have to use them. Because giving silently has not worked. Doing my part quietly has been twisted into them casting me as a charity case. I realize, with a slow burning pain, that I am not just holding a family together. And this morning, they reminded me I had none. Maybe it is time they remembered I still have everything, including the power to begin again. I first noticed the labels on the yogurt containers. For John only, kids' lunch. Do not touch. Do not eat, mine. The Sharpie ink was still fresh, like a warning freshly posted. My hands hovered above the shelf, wondering if the strawberries I washed and sliced that morning would be labeled next. I shut the fridge door slowly and leaned on the countertop, trying to process the message without reading too deeply into it. But the meaning was clear. They were drawing lines. At first I brushed it off. Maybe it was about organization. But the next morning I opened the fridge to find my apples had been moved to the bottom drawer and my milk replaced with almond milk I never bought. When I reached for eggs, there was a sticky note taped to the carton. Please use your own groceries. Later that day, my daughter-in-law approached me with a rehearsed tone, smiling like she was delivering good news. I think we should all start buying our own food just to be fair, she said, emphasizing the words like they were diplomacy. To be fair? I echoed, setting down the sponge I had been using to scrub their stove. Yes, she replied, folding laundry she had left on the couch for days. We all have different preferences and budgets. It just makes more sense. I said nothing. I simply nodded and wrote bread and milk on a notepad I kept tucked in my room. My room. Not a shared room, not a family space. Just mine. Like I was a tenant in the house I helped build. The next week, the dynamic changed. I had a separate shelf in the pantry and a designated drawer in the fridge. I began marking my items too, not out of pettiness, but out of necessity. And with every label, I felt myself disappearing. Inch by inch, cupboard by cupboard. Then came the text thread. I had always been part of the family group chat, used mostly for coordinating soccer practices, birthdays, school pickups. I noticed I had not received any new messages for days. Curious, I asked my son if there was anything I needed to know about the kids' camp sign-up. He looked confused. I thought we talked about that last night. I stared. I wasn't there. He scrolled his phone, then paused. Oh, it must have moved to the new thread. What new thread? He looked away. The one just for the three of us. It's easier for scheduling. So now I was not even part of the family calendar. I was not a vote. I was not a voice. I was an afterthought. I overheard them making weekend plans I was never told about. I'd hear the front door open and close and look out the window to see them pulling out of the driveway with the kids, dressed for something festive. Birthday parties, dinners, day trips. I was never invited. No one even bothered to lie about why. I started eating meals in the living room, not at the table anymore. I did not want to sit at a table where people whispered about my presence, where my food was separate, where my conversation felt like a door they could not wait to close. The living room used to feel like mine too. I had picked out the curtains with my son. I had sewn the cushion covers myself when they could not afford a new couch. Now my favorite armchair was always occupied by her throw pillows and laptop. My blanket went missing one day. Later I found it in the dog crate. Then, one chilly afternoon, I forgot to shut the garage door. It was an honest mistake. I had brought in groceries, my own of course, and must have hit the wrong button. The groceries were heavy and my back had started to act up again. But that night, she came in fuming. "Do you realize the garage door was open all afternoon?" she snapped. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, standing near the sink. "Anyone could have walked in. Are you trying to get us robbed?" "No, it was a mistake." "It always is with you," she snapped, voice rising. "It's always a mistake. You forget things. You slow us down. You eat our food. You crowd our space." I opened my mouth, but she raised her hand, not to hit me. God, no, but to silence me. "You're just a guest here," she said through clenched teeth. "Not family." And there it was again, guest. The word cut deeper this time. It was not frustration. It was truth, as she saw it. I was not a mother-in-law, not a grandmother, not a contributor. I was a burden in her home. I did not reply. I walked into the living room, sat on the couch, and stared at the family photo on the mantel, the one where I stood behind them, hands on their shoulders. the proud matriarch. I looked at my own smile in the photo and realized it had been a long time since I saw her in the mirror. I sat there until the house went quiet, and I thought, not for the first time, about the account in my name. The one that fed this house, warmed it, kept the lights on. I had never wanted to use it as leverage, but maybe they needed a reminder of who really made this house a home. I spent the entire morning at the kitchen table with papers spread out before me like a battlefield map. It had been a long time since I looked through my records, but the folders were still there, tucked neatly in the second drawer of the old oak cabinet I had moved from my old home. I had kept everything, every deposit slip, every signed agreement, every letter from the credit union. My husband had taught me that paper was power, and I had not forgotten. I found the folder labeled Trust Account Marjorie P. It was thick, heavier than I remembered. I pulled out the most recent statements, reading line by line. Monthly transfers, $2,000, 0 cents, $1,800, 0 cents, $2,300, 0 cents. Each one feeding the same debit card my son and daughter-in-law used for household expenses, groceries, tuition, utility bills. All of it came from that account. And every withdrawal bore the same label, authorized by MP. My initials, not theirs. The account was mine, fully, legally, irrevocably. When I first created it, I thought of it as an act of love. My son had been laid off from a corporate job during the pandemic, and his wife had just given birth. They were drowning in expenses, and I stepped in quietly. I had always been the kind of mother who helped without boasting. I called my financial advisor, asked about setting up a trust, not one that would burden them with inheritance taxes, but one that I could control while I was still alive, and I had controlled it, every dime. I thought about all the times I'd paid their electric bill before it was even due, the times I covered summer camp registration without being asked, the times they smiled at me like I was part of something, and the hundreds of times they ate food from my funds and never once asked where it came from. They assumed it was my pension, my savings, my fading generosity. They never once considered I might have structure, that I might have a system, that I might still be sharper than they gave me credit for. I picked up the phone and dialed the advisor. "Mrs. Patterson," he said warmly, "what can I do for you today?" "I want to confirm something," I said, voice level, heart steady. "The trust account for my family, under my name. I am still the sole trustee, correct?" "Absolutely," he replied without hesitation. "You're the only one who can authorize transactions. You have full control." "And if I wanted to freeze it?" I asked, more a statement than a question. "Then it freezes," he said simply. "They would have no access to the funds, no transfers, no withdrawals, nothing." I paused, letting the silence sit between us. "Rely on it, you know," I murmured. "I know," he said softly, "but you don't owe them permission to protect yourself." I looked at the most recent bank statement again. A grocery charge from Whole Foods, a tuition payment, a clothing store receipt for children's shoes, all things I had willingly provided for, all things I had quietly made possible, and all of it taken for granted. I imagined their next trip to the store, the card declining, the cashier apologizing, my daughter-in-law's eyes widening in embarrassment, my son's confusion, and in that instant, I did not feel cruelty. I felt clarity. I closed the folder. "I'd like you to freeze the account," I said. He didn't ask why. He only replied, "Consider it done." And just like that, I took the first step back toward myself. I didn't tell anyone. Not my son, not the kids, not the woman who had hissed through her teeth that I was just a guest. I simply smiled. That quiet kind of smile that knows something no one else does. That afternoon, I brewed tea, folded laundry, and baked a peach cobbler for the kids' afternoon snack. One last gesture from the woman they thought they could disregard. I placed it on the counter with a note, "Enjoy, darlings, Grandma." Then I went to my room, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared out the window. No rage, no tears, just the silent hum of a power they never realized I had. I had given them love in the form of funds, but now I was taking something back, not the money, my place, my pride, my voice. I woke early that morning with no alarm, no noise, just a steady breath and a certainty I had not felt in years. The sun had barely touched the curtains when I sat at the dining table, my last morning in that house, and wrote a simple note in my cleanest handwriting. No emotion, no flourish, just the truth in ink. Thank you for reminding me who I really am. I folded the paper once, placed it beneath the salt shaker in the center of the kitchen table, and set a warm cup of tea beside it. It was Jasmine, her favorite. Or maybe it used to be. I could not remember anymore. I packed only one suitcase, just enough for the next chapter. My favorite cardigan, the pearl earrings my husband gave me on our 25th anniversary, and the worn paperback I never finished. Everything else, every dish I had washed, every blanket I had folded, every meal I had paid for, could stay. I would not take crumbs from a table I was no longer welcome at. I left the house without a sound. No door slam, no goodbye. I slid the keys into the mailbox slot and walked toward the waiting taxi. The driver asked if I needed help with my bag. I smiled and said no, it was light, much lighter than I expected. 2 hours later, I was unlocking the door of a one-bedroom apartment tucked in the edge of Colorado Springs, with views of the hot springs just a few blocks down, a place I had quietly purchased 5 years ago with part of my inheritance, not out of distrust, but out of wisdom, a just-in-case plan. I never thought I would need it, but I was glad I did. The apartment smelled of pine wood and clean floors, empty but not lonely. I opened the windows and let in the cool morning air. I sat at the table and watched the light pour across the floorboards, unbothered and free. The silence felt different here. It felt like mine. For the first time in years, I didn't hear footsteps rushing upstairs or voices behind closed doors. I didn't hear whispers about my forgetfulness or irritation when I asked to be included. I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's house. I turned off my phone. The calls came within days. First, my son. A text. Mom, did something happen to the account? The card's not working. Then another. The school called. Tuition bounced. Can we talk? Then my daughter-in-law. Is this some kind of joke? The electric company says we're 2 weeks overdue. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I enjoyed watching them flail, but because I had nothing left to say that they were ready to hear. They had made it very clear I was just a guest. Guests do not get emergency calls. Guests do not carry burdens. Guests do not hold the power to destroy or save. But I had never been a guest. I had been the quiet current beneath their comforts, the invisible spine of their stability. And when I walked out, the whole body trembled. A week after I left, they received a formal notice from the bank. No funds available. A second notice from the school. Your child's tuition payment has failed. Immediate resolution required. And finally, the utility company. Your account is now past due. Electricity services will be suspended if not paid within 48 hours. It happened faster than even I expected, not because I wanted it to, but because they had come to rely so blindly on what I provided that they never built anything of their own. I had made it too easy, too warm, too safe. They had forgotten the hands that held it all together, so when those hands let go, they fell. I sat on my balcony that evening, a cup of warm tea in my hand, watching the sky darken over Colorado Springs. I thought of my grandchildren. I missed their laughter. I missed their sticky fingers and sleepy hugs. But I would not go back, because if I did, I'd be returning not as a mother, but as an enabler. They needed to learn, and I needed to live. In the peace of that moment, I breathed deeply and smiled, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. I had left quietly, but the silence I left behind was deafening. They unraveled faster than I expected. A week after I froze the trust account, the texts turned frantic. My son sent message after message, each more urgent than the last. Mom, please call. We're trying to figure this out. Can you just explain what's happening? She may shut off the Wi-Fi today. Then came the emails, pleading, justifying, apologizing. But I did not reply. I had spent years replying. Years of accommodating, of softening my words, of shrinking to make space for people who needed my money but not my voice. This time, I let the silence speak for me. From what I heard through friends and neighbors, the house I left behind was no longer warm. The pantry was bare. The fridge, once full of labeled containers and store-brand milk, now held only ketchup, an expired carton of eggs, and the last of the almond milk my daughter-in-law once told me to stop drinking. She lost her job 2 weeks in, Something about too many missed deadlines and not enough childcare. My son took up temporary work, mowing lawns, hauling trash, anything that paid by the hour. He used to wear a tie every day. Now he wore blisters. A neighbor I used to walk with called one morning just to talk. She said, "I saw her yesterday, your daughter-in-law." She was in the driveway yelling into her phone, like someone stole her whole life. I almost laughed, because in a way, they had stolen mine first. The kitchen that once smelled of cinnamon and morning pancakes now sat cold. The oven was rarely used. The dining table was empty. She used to slam that guest room door like punctuation on every argument. Now, she left it open, hoping maybe I'd walk back through it. But I would not, because I was no longer the woman in the background, no longer the free babysitter, no longer the one cooking in silence while being spoken of in whispers. I was gone, completely. I had not blocked them. I had simply stepped out of reach. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, a message came through. Just 3 words. "We need you." A few hours later, another. "Please come back. I'm sorry." And then, one final voicemail. Her voice, shaken but trying to sound composed. "Marjorie, I know we said some things we shouldn't have. I know we were unfair. But we need help. The kids need stability. John's working late every night. And well, it's hard. Please, just, can we talk?" I played it twice, then deleted it, because something in her voice still sounded like she thought she could fix this with words. But it was not her words that built that house. It was not her effort that kept it warm. It was mine, and I was done pretending otherwise. She thought I was a guest, but I had been the foundation, and when I walked out, the whole house remembered who had kept it standing. My mornings are quieter now, not the kind of quiet that aches, but the kind that feels like a soft exhale after holding your breath for too long. I brew a pot of Earl Grey each day at 7 sharp. I sit by the window of my little apartment, watching the steam rise from my mug. And for the first time in years, no one needs anything from me. No one's asking what's for breakfast. No one's handing me a grocery list or barking a passive-aggressive thanks as they rush out the door. It is just me and peace. The days stretch gently now. I read the books I never finished, the ones that gathered dust while I was busy being useful or feeling useful. I've started writing again. Nothing serious, just letters to myself, little reminders that I am still here and still whole. Sometimes I take walks down to the hot springs, the sound of water trickling over rocks, a simple melody reminding me that everything flows eventually, even pain. I joined a group at the local rec center. Women retired, resilient, and ready. We meet twice a week for tea and discussion. Most of them are widows like me, women who poured their lives into families, only to find themselves emptied in return. We talk about grown children who forgot, husbands who took but never taught, and the strange silence that comes when you realize you're no longer needed, not for support, not for purpose, just existence. There is something profound in our collective vulnerability, a poignant reassurance that we are not alone. A shared knowingness passes between us when our stories spiral beyond explanation, but yet demand to be heard. But we also laugh, loudly, with unexpected joy. Some of the ladies call me Grandma with the last laugh. I do not mind. I earned it. It took time, but goodness did I earn it. We giggle over shared memories. The bad haircut a daughter threw a tantrum over, the disastrous casserole that burned to the bottom of the pan, the husband who thought a blender could solve all problems, and how we secretly enjoyed the chaos more than we'd admit. Sometimes I help them review their wills, their savings, their legal documents hidden away in kitchen drawers and shoeboxes. I show them how to check who really owns their house to ensure their names are on the deed. I remind them to keep the original titled documents in a safe place, not on a shelf gathering dust. We talk about reading the fine print, about never assuming love will automatically protect you when illness, death, or greed knock at the door. I let them cry, and I hold their hands through the realization that betrayal can be clothed in familiarity. One woman cried when she realized her son had forged her signature to refinance her house. Another smiled through tears as she shredded the joint credit card her daughter kept maxing out. We call those moments Taking Back Tuesdays, because sometimes justice is not found in courtrooms filled with lawyers in suits. It is found in quiet afternoons with a shredder and a witness, when your own trembling hands decide enough is enough. I do not hate my son. that love never completely goes away, even when it is tested, even when it wavers. It is love shaped by decades of lullabies, bandaged knees, college essays crammed titled "Why Mom is the Best," and tearful goodbyes at the airport. I do not hate my daughter-in-law either, although I admit there were days when I questioned whether her kindness was genuine or performative. But I no longer offer myself on the altar of being liked. I am not here to be accepted. I am here to live. I gave too much for too long. It was the kind of giving that meant saying yes when I wanted to say no, that meant putting their needs ahead of mine day after day until my own mirror reflected a stranger. But when I finally stopped giving without boundaries, when I pulled my voice back, I did not lose them. In fact, I found the woman who once held dreams of writing a book, the one who hated wasting time and cherished quiet solitude, the one who missed the sound of her own heartbeat, not someone else's deadlines. She was there, hidden behind decades of duty and expectations. If I could whisper to that woman, the one washing dishes at 2 a.m., the one poring over furnace bills and life insurance forms, I would say, yes, you matter, even when no one says so, especially when no one says so. So now I spend my mornings calmly, my days deliberately. I meet friends for poetry readings at the library. I sit for hours by the old oak tree in the park, sketching lines on a notepad. I volunteer at the senior center, helping with the lunch program or just offering company and conversation to women whose names I may not remember, but whose smiles I never forget. I have learned that retirement is not an ending, it is a new beginning. A chance to rediscover who you are when no one is asking you to be anything. One afternoon, I hosted my first proper dinner here, with simple dishes, roasted vegetables, a harvest salad, store-bought bread. I invited 2 ladies from the group and another neighbor I met at the coffee shop. We laughed so much I needed help cleaning up, the table echoing with conversation, ringing with connection. I realized there, in the soft lamplight, that this feeling is what life was always meant to be. I can feel the river of time around me, but not dragging me toward regret. Instead, it nourishes the banks where I now stand, wide and rooted. My phone still lights up with messages from my son. He says he misses the sound of my laughter. He asks if I need help with anything. He ends with, "Mom, you're welcome back anytime." But I do not answer. I know words can hold love only for so long. It is actions that speak across rooms. I visit when I feel like it. We meet in cafes, not at that kitchen table anymore. And when I return home, I sleep peacefully, the door closing softly behind me. This is my life now, full, calm, and unapologetically mine. And in the quiet mornings, I sip my Earl Grey and think, I found myself, and she was worth waiting for. I do not hate my son. That would be too simple, too clean. Hatred implies distance, and our pain, his and mine, was never distant. It was tangled, rooted, grown from the same soil that once bore bedtime stories, scraped knees, and a little boy who used to cling to the hem of my apron just because he wanted to be close. I raised him to be better, kinder, more grateful, and for a time, he was. He held doors open for elderly women. He volunteered on weekends. He used to kiss me on the cheek before dinner and whisper thank you without anyone asking. He once told me, at 13, that when he grew up, he would buy me a house so I could stop working late nights at the hospital. But life has a way of stripping the softness off people, especially when they choose pride over memory, especially when comfort becomes entitlement. I see now that I shielded him too long. I protected him from the weight of responsibility, thinking I was loving him, but in doing so, I let it crush me instead. And still, I do not hate him. I just will not rescue him anymore. There's a difference between walking away in anger and stepping back in wisdom. Mine was not an exit fueled by bitterness. It was powered by clarity. Motherhood taught me many things. It taught me how to stretch $1 into 4 meals, how to hide tears while stirring soup, how to smile when I was drowning, how to sit through judgment at PTA meetings in a second-hand coat while pretending not to care, how to endure disrespect in the name of keeping peace at home, and how to pretend, over and over again, that I was fine. But the most important thing motherhood taught me, when to let go, because when your hands are always holding someone else up, you forget what standing feels like. You bend so often you forget, you were ever upright. To the women who might hear this someday, the mothers, the grandmothers, the wives, the caregivers, this is for you. Do not let them turn you into a stranger in the house you helped build. Do not let their comfort become your prison. Do not give and give and give until you vanish into the walls, nothing more than a whisper at the edge of their busy lives. Keep your name on the deed. Keep your name on your dignity. And when they start calling you bitter or difficult or dramatic, remember, they only say that when you stop handing them everything. They will call you selfish the moment you stop being selfless for their convenience. When they forget who taught them how to hold a spoon, how to fold a shirt, how to comfort a child, remind them, not with lectures or pleading, but with silence, not rage, not vengeance, just the quiet truth of your absence. Because some lessons are only learned in the echo of a door closing behind you. I used to stand in that kitchen like a shadow, cooking meals for people who no longer looked me in the eye. I used to walk on eggshells in my own home, afraid that my presence would disrupt the fragile illusion of their independence. I used to swallow my opinions whole because it was not my place. I was made to feel like a guest in the very place I helped build, and that broke something in me. Not loudly, not all at once, but slowly, like a candle burning to the end of its wick. Now, I wake each morning in the soft glow of my own space. I pour my tea with both hands, no one interrupting, no chores waiting, no passive-aggressive sighs from across the room. I eat when I'm hungry. I laugh when I feel like it. I play music out loud and I sing even if I'm off-key. I taste every drop of peace I once paid for them to have. They still struggle. I hear through the grapevine that the bank account remains empty. The house is cold in winter. She lost her job. He picks up shifts where he can. The kids wear the same shoes for 2 school years straight. I do not watch. I do not gloat. But I do remember. I remember being called a burden. I remember the grocery lists that had their names written on everything except mine. I remember the way she said, "You don't get a say under our roof," as if I hadn't funded the walls that held her words. I remember sitting in that house, heart pounding, hearing my name in hushed tones when they thought I was asleep. And if they ever wonder how it all fell apart, if they ever sit in the cold kitchen and look at one another with confusion and ask, what happened, they will have to answer this. What happens when the hands that held you finally let go? When the woman who covered your rent, bought your groceries, paid your bills, and smiled through every insult stops? I gave them warmth. They gave me warning labels on food. I gave them stability. They gave me exile. I gave them memories. They returned convenience. So I gave them what they feared most, freedom from me, and I will not take it back. As I sit now, surrounded by books and music and women who see me, not use me, I do not wish to undo the past. I do not pine for reconciliation. I do not pray for their return. I hope they learn. And if they never do, then I hope they at least understand what it means to lose someone who never asked for much, only respect. Because at the end of it all, that's what this story has always been about. It's not revenge, not resentment, but remembrance. Remembrance of who I was before I was silenced, before I was labeled, before I was thanked for everything with nothing. So, to the daughters-in-law who forget who funded their homes, to the sons who grow too proud to remember whose hands wipe their tears, to the families who think love is conditional and care is transactional, let me say it plainly, my daughter-in-law called me a guest, but today I own peace, and she's just paying rent to survive. Thank you for sitting with me through this story. If you felt a spark of recognition, if a part of you whispered, that could have been me, then remember this, we are many, mothers, grandmothers, women whose silence once filled every room and whose strength now fills every word. At Grandma, True Stories, we do not shout. We remember, we reclaim, we remind the world what happens when the quietest woman finally speaks. If you believe in justice told slowly and truth that cannot be erased, subscribe to Grandma, True Stories. Join us for more real stories from women who were never just guests, but the foundation all along. Because when a grandma speaks, the world doesn't just listen, it changes.